What's going on?
Um, Nothing much. I'm just finishing up. This will be the end of my junior year. Yeah, I know it like went fast. It went fast. So I'm doing like kind of an internship service hour thing with one of the school districts there and where I'm going in and observing teachers. So this is for this class, like observing the classroom management in this class.
Right.
But yeah, other
So,
than
so
that,
you're still doing secondary English?
yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
Yes, ma'am. I'm very excited. I'm starting to study for my praxis, taking the
Okay.
pre-tests and everything. So,
Okay.
yeah, how have you been?
I'm doing okay. Are you going to stay in Virginia?
No, that's not the plan. Close in that area, but I'm
Okay.
leaning more towards like the North Carolina, South Carolina area for
Okay.
right now. Um,
Okay.
until I find something else or I find somewhere else that I want to move.
Look at you. Oh,
I'm
that's awesome. So
excited.
yeah, we're doing great. My son started teaching this year.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was teaching seventh grade social studies.
Oh,
Yeah, and
oh.
he will not be teaching next year. He's going to go to grad school.
Okay.
And then the following year, he'll get into a high school. He'd prefer a high
Okay.
school.
Yeah. That's like I right now I'm doing like my service hours in the middle school and I've always thought that I would prefer high school, but this is kind of showing me that I feel like I would definitely flourish more in a high school than I would.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's really important for you to spend as much time as you can in both, so
Hmm.
that you can, especially if there was any reservations. Always knew I wasn't set up for middle school. I always knew that. Joshua wasn't sure, so
Hmm.
it's good that he's doing this. So tell me. So what are you asking me? What's
Alrighty, so this is for our class. This is our final project for a project we're doing, and it's kind of like in a series. So everybody in my class is interviewing a teacher that of our choice about their classroom management and how that impacted just the learning environment in general.
Mhm, mhm,
And then we're all just sharing,
mhm.
so I'm recording this Zoom, by the
Yeah,
way,
that's
and
fine.
we're
Yeah, that's
sharing
fine.
it with the class. So we'll all watch each other's interviews
Okay.
and just sort of to kind of gain knowledge through that from different teachers, because of course every
Okay.
teacher has a different way to do things. So just
Sure.
gaining knowledge from that.
Sure.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and ask the first question.
Go
So I
right
have
ahead.
just a few. So the first question is, how do you define classroom management?
So I think it can be defined two ways,
Mhm.
from the perspective of the student and from the perspective of the teacher. From the perspective of the teacher, classroom management is the manner in which the teacher essentially has control over the dynamics of the class. And that control is a loaded word, but that control is necessary so that policies and procedures can move forward and so that the kids can learn. I think classroom management from a student's perspective is how chaotic is the environment? Is the teacher trying to create the calmest environment where I can learn?
Mhm.
Um, is the teacher respecting who I am and where I'm coming from? You know, to the level of which a child knows who they are and where they're coming from. Because it's huge, vast development. Um, but I think and I hate using the word control, but I think it has everything to do with that, because once you can control the environment, then you can release and allow the kids to exhibit their own sense of control, and then kind of play the seesaw game and level that out and see how much are we giving them as opposed to how much are we taking from them.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. The next question is, what do you think are the relationships between meaningful work, time on task, and student disruptions? That was a lot, so if you need me to say any of the parts
Yeah,
again.
can you repeat that for me, please?
Okay, so it's what do you think the relationship is between meaningful work, time on task, and student disruptions?
So, what is the relationship between the three, is what you're
Yes.
asking.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, meaningful work, see, time on task doesn't always lead to meaningful work, and meaningful work isn't always demonstrative of time on task.
Hmm.
So they can play together, but that's not always the case. We and then classroom disruptions, it depends on what the disruption is, and it depends on the level of the class. Um, I can recall very clearly, your experience as a high school senior in an English lit class, we would oftentimes get distracted and things would oftentimes get disruptive in a good, healthy way. But does that mean that we're taking away from meaningful work? Not necessarily. So I think the definition of those three and the interplay are a lot more locked in if we're looking at like high stakes testing classes. At the time, sophomores would have to take, the I-STEP, the state exams. I think when it comes down to high stakes testing, then there has to be some sort of clear delineation between the three. But if it's in a class that allows for the creative disruption, then you got to roll with it. Now, if it's a disruption for the sake of there just being a disruption because the kid is acting out or whatever, then obviously you have to isolate that so that we can continue moving forward. But I think healthy distractions and disruptions are what keep the kids focused and, ultimately on task. And I always tell, my guys now, and I know I've told you, when you were a high school student, laughter physiologically helps you retain information. So if we're laughing and if we're distracted about something and I can take that and manipulate it into a lesson, then I'm going to go with it.
Mhm. Thank you. And the next question is, what is one strategy every new teacher should employ for effective classroom management?
Learn their names and the proper pronunciation of names and learn their family dynamics in the first week without being intrusive. So without clearly coming out and saying and asking all the questions that you might be wondering, does he live in a single parent household? Is that young lady's father out of the picture, whatever it is? Kind of mine for information with other teachers. Hey, I'm teaching John Smith. What do you know about him?
Mhm.
Hey, I'm teaching, Chris Jones. What do we know about her? That way you're outfitted with information because the more you know about them on a personal level, again, without being intrusive, without saying, hey, by the way, I know that your parent is suffering from a debilitating disease. It's way too much. But if you know they have three younger brothers, then you can use that to your advantage in developing a rapport. It doesn't hurt getting, the nitty gritty insight is really important too, because that'll help you if you see a student who's struggling or a student who's falling asleep in class or a student who just isn't turning in their work. If you knew from the get-go, oh, his dad has cancer, then we keep that in the back of our mind and kind of work with that kid within the safe, healthy parameters that you can work with. But for all new teachers, know their names, know how to pronounce their names. And this is something that as an older teacher, I'm still figuring out. Pronouns are very important now. Know how the children want to be identified. There are certain laws and there are certain school systems that will prohibit you from automatically calling a student what they prefer as opposed to what their legal name is. So you have to make sure that you follow your school's protocol. I have a student who, instead of their birth name, has chosen another, gender neutral name and can't just say, hey, and use that name. So I had to make sure, hey, is the family okay with this? But I think that all depends on school systems and districts. So you'd have to, figure out if that's the right thing for you to do. But knowing their names for sure, knowing their names and being able to laugh with them, and knowing, if they're part of sports teams, just knowing as much as you can about them. I used to give out this pretty hefty survey that asked them like a gazillion questions, primarily with the younger students. And then I would just kind of sort through all that and go, oh, these three like manga, those two work part-time at Five Below. And then I'd start to figure out who's who.
How do you differentiate between disruption and a symptom of a larger challenge?
Random disruption, periodic disruption isn't anything that I would be terribly concerned with, based on my experience and my time in the classroom. I think random disruptions for new teachers should pay attention to them. Um, oh, give me a second. Everybody knows at 2 o'clock I'm free, so phone starts ringing. Okay. Um, so I think a new teacher needs to pay attention to those disruptions and try to figure out why they're happening. The larger issue are when the disruptions are more frequent and when they start to affect more than the disruptive student. So if they're starting to interfere with the dynamic of the class, then you need to take, one-on-one conversations first, and then you go to the parent or guardian, and then you go to guides. There's a hierarchy of the steps that you take to kind of remedy the situation, and make sure that you enforce consequences. There's got to be consequences.
I agree. This is kind of something that I've been experiencing in my service hours. There's like a couple of students who are a disruption to themselves, like they don't get their work done, but then they're also disrupting the entire class that I'm in.
Yeah.
And the teacher that I'm shadowing, she tries her best, but she doesn't really have any backing with parental guidance or administration, so they kind of just get sent right back into the classroom. So
and
like a
and that's
constant disruption.
and that's going to happen. And so that's when, depending on the situation, something for you to consider is that's when you really get to know the kid. And always it's like a healthy, sneaky, manipulative kind of way of learning more information about them without them understanding that you're asking for all this so that you can trick them into doing work. It's the mind game with it because they're adolescents. Um, but really finding out what's the motivation behind. And there are going to be times when you just lose them. You just can't fight anymore. I've had, you know, I don't want to say crazy, wildly disruptive students, and it's like I can't sacrifice 29 for the sake of the one,
Mhm.
you know. So then you implore the 29 to do what they have to do, which then quits feeding the fire of the one, and you try to solve it that way. But sometimes you're just not going to win, and
Right.
that's hard because you really want to. I mean, you don't want to win, but you really want to connect, and you really want the kid to use the time to their advantage, and sometimes you just don't.
Alrighty. And then the last is just asking to share a personal story with a before and after scenario that shows your management techniques and how it improved the learning environment as a whole.
So I don't have a before and after that would occur in one specific school year, but I can say a before and after over the trajectory of my career. When I first started teaching, I taught, um, I was teaching in New York City, I was teaching in the Bronx, and I was teaching in a community where I would safely say about 75 to 80% of the student population were students who were coming in from the West Indies. So they're coming in from Trinidad, Tobago, Jamaica, St. Kitts, Nevis, all the islands. And while English was a standard means of communication, the patois and the dialects made it very, very difficult to communicate. And then you had, they were immigrant families. And so you had all of the difficulties that come along with that. And then you have the comparison of the school systems that they were coming from and then the expectations of the New York school system. And so I had a lot of kids that were falling below academically, and those kids acted up. If I don't understand the work, why should I pay attention? And I'm not ashamed to admit this. I had one class, they were sophomores, it was an English 10 class, where I could do nothing else. And I say this in retrospect. Back then, I thought I could do nothing else but to leave the distracting kids in the classroom, close the door. Now, this is completely inappropriate and completely
Completely
irresponsible.
irresponsible.
I don't advocate for this at all. This is just my experience. Left the kids in the classroom, closed the door, and I taught the kids who wanted to learn out in the hallway because I didn't know what else to do. It's probably 2 or 3 years into my career. In retrospect, had I really tracked and broke down and like I said, communicated with families and tried to connect with these kids and find out what they're passionate about and meet them where they were at academically, I could have circumvented all of this and not actually put them in a dangerous situation, which is leaving them in a classroom unattended. So I could say I did that because I was 23, 24, and quite honestly, if I remember correctly, the principal was okay with this. So then that goes to show you the level of support, like you were saying, administrative support. We don't always have that. So I learned from that pretty quickly. I mean, that was a pretty rough year. And I learned from that pretty quickly. And then the years got easier and easier after having gone through that tremendous challenge. And they were probably, I mean, it was probably 50-50. So and the class sizes were about 34. So you figure about 15 to 18 kids in the classroom, just doing whatever they were doing, as long as, they weren't spilling out into the hallway. And then 15, 16 kids, and we would sit on the floor and we would read and we would do grammar and whatever else we would do. So I'm glad I had that experience, as horrible as it was, because it never happened again. And it was isolated to one class and one school, probably just one semester, if I remember correctly. Um, but that's my before and after.
Okay. Well, that was the last question, but if you have anything else that you want to share or any other advice that you'd like to give, you can feel free. We would definitely love it because teaching is going to be hard, especially now. Like all of us being in our service hours, we're kind of all experiencing some similar things, especially with
Yeah.
behavioral things and distractions in the classroom. So if you have
Yeah.
any advice for that.
I would read as much as you possibly, especially in regards to secondary ELA. I would read and learn and take as many classes or online classes, or go to the library and read books about differentiating your instruction, learning about how the learning disabled child learns, the
Mhm.
different forms of learning disabilities, how the ADHD child learns. I know that in my generation and in my cohort, they gave us no special education training and then threw us into classrooms with students who had different learning styles, and we didn't know what to do. If you could minor in it, if you can get a certificate in it, if you can get any form of documentable training in it, I think that would be most beneficial. Beyond that, literacy training. Literacy training is a really big thing. And again, I'm just speaking from my experiences. You go to high school to you go to college to be a high school English teacher. Well, those kids should know how to read. And then you teach high school kids, and they're not all reading,
Mhm.
remotely at grade level. So understanding literacy and how to break things down and how to find all of the millions of resources that are online that will help you differentiate texts and scaffold and bring those literacy skills up. So special education needs, differentiating your instruction, literacy skills, which I know, speaking from my experience, they didn't teach us any of this in college at all. And I didn't even pick up any of this through my student teaching, which is unfortunate. Beyond that, and I'm not going to make this political by any means, but being very aware of the state of education within your community, within your school district, within your state, within your part of the country, so that you know what you may be up against in the future. That way you can advocate, that way you can support your students' needs ahead of time. Um, and again, I'm not going to make this political. There are, you know me, I'm wildly liberal. Okay, I am wildly opinionated, and there are so many things that are going on in our community, in our school community, that our students need to know about so that they're ready for college. So that they're ready for that next step. It's not even college, just ready for life. Because you're sending them off to be adults. Like, it's you, and then that's it, right? Then they're choosing what to do next. So we're really you and me. We're like the last line of defense, you know, before these people go off and do their thing. And so just to be really aware of what's going on, so that there are no surprises, know about the policies, know about if you are pro-union, anti-union, whatever it is, just understand what your policies are so that you're not surprised when things happen. Because if you're not educated, and I wasn't educated for many, 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 many years, because I figured, it doesn't apply, not a big deal. And now things are applying. And I'm like, oh man, I got to look into this. What's going on there? I have to arm myself with information. Because for you and your cohort in particular, it's a very, very tumultuous time, you know? So you gotta understand what's going on, and you have to understand what you can control and what you can't control. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
I really
Thank
am.
you.
I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of the woman you're becoming.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You
And
helped.
I really, I know. I really, really, really want you to reach out and let me know what's going on.
I will.
Okay.
Now
And
that I
if you
have your email, yes.
yes, and if you ever need hours here, or if you come home and you want a job, I'm retiring in 6 years, so
Okay.
you can
Okay.
come
Oh, you still have some time.
slide.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that'll give you your time to travel, right?
Hmm.
And figure your life out. And if you want to come back, you come take my job.
Okay.
All right, beautiful. And
Alrighty.
listen, tell your sister to stop by. I was glad that I met her. I didn't realize that that was your sister, right?
Yeah, it's my sister.
Yeah,
Hmm.
tell her to come by if she needs anything. You know,
Okay, I
she's
will.
stressing out or whatever. I got
I
her.
definitely will.
All right,
Yes.
baby.
Thank you,
You take
Mrs.
good care of
King.
yourself. All right,
You
honey. Bye.
too. Thank you. Bye.
Good luck. Bye bye.